Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with chief foreign commentator for The Eye, Michael Day, and the editor for the Jewish Chronicle, Wallis Simons. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Reign of terror, that's how the Metro describes Iran's attack on Israel. The Eye reflects on G7 nations' warning that Iran is risking an uncontrollable wider war following the attack. And that warning also makes the front page of The Guardian, which adds that the US will not take part in any counter-offensive. The Financial Times reports on Israel's war cabinet convening to discuss potential responses to Iran's recent drone and missile attack. The Mail's headline reads, "It's time the world faces evil empire in Tehran," reflecting the words of the Israeli president. And the Times looks at Israel's vow to seek revenge following last night, as Biden is said to have told Benjamin Netanyahu to take the win after most drones and missiles were shot down over Israel. The Express runs with the same story. And the Sun reports on the RAF helping Israel against Iran's attack and says it was the biggest air-to-air battle involving the UK since the Falklands. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Michael Day and Wallis Simons. Welcome to both of you. We'll start with the Metro. I mean, there is one story that's leading most of the newspapers, and that is the attack, the Iranian attack on Israel last night. The headline in the Metro, Reign of Terror. Michael.
Well, this is the big story today. I mean, it is a reign of terror, quite extraordinary. 300 missiles raining down on Israel. Even more extraordinary, perhaps, 99% of them, we were told, were intercepted. So thankfully, there wasn't very much damage. There was one, I think a young girl has been injured, which is obviously not good. She's being treated. The big question now, of course, is what will Israel do next? People are warning, quite rightly, I think, that the Middle East is on the verge of a major conflict now. And I think most people, including Israel's allies, America and the UK and France, the rest of them are saying, urging it to be cautious. We don't want this escalation now. And they're hoping, as Sunak said tonight, that calm heads will prevail. And I hope they're right, actually.
But they are still saying that it is ultimately still Israel's decision how they react, aren't they, Jake?
Absolutely. I mean, the Metro is pointing out that RAF jets took part in shooting down some of these projectiles, some of these 350 projectiles that were coming over into Israel. And that was really quite an interesting development because it wasn't just Britain and the US, who you might expect, but also countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia took part in defending Israel. And I think that that was a very, very significant development because, in my view, it showed that Iran may have miscalculated because in launching this attack, it actually accelerated the sense of solidarity and the alliance that's been building between Israel and the conservative Sunni states in recent years, since the Abraham Accords in particular, since Donald Trump presided over those being signed. And you can see why that's the case, because when the Saudis in 2019 suffered a similar attack from the Houthis on behalf of the Iranians, they fired all these rockets into Saudi territory and destroyed a lot of their oil capabilities, costing hundreds of millions of dollars. They were unable to defend themselves in the way that Israel has done. So they would have been looking at Israel and seeing this 99% success rate of defending against Iranian projectiles. And they were thinking to themselves, you know what, a normalisation deal, a peace deal with Israel, an alliance, actually makes more sense than it did the day before.
Michael, do you agree with that?
I'd make the point that tonight, I mean, today, we hear the war cabinet is split in Israel what to do next. Some are less extreme.
Not on whether to respond, but
Israel, of course, it will respond. It's, as I think Benny Gantz, who has been brought in as a moderate voice, military expert in the cabinet, has said today, we will respond, but it will be when we've rebuilt our regional coalition with our allies, and we'll do it at our time in a sensible way. And I noticed you mentioned Jordan. Of course, Jordan's actually Israel owes Jordan something because, I mean, Jordan, they've had unrest, and now the government in Jordan will actually be in trouble, I think, for actually helping. You know, half of its population is Palestinian refugees, and I think Jordan will have to, lose some political points for its population for helping Israel. I'm not saying it shouldn't have done that, but I think Israel needs to think very carefully about how it actually responds in terms of rebuilding its links with allies. And of course, not annoying America as well, which it's done quite consistently in the last few months.
And Jake, on that note, do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet will have uppermost in their mind the thoughts of America, and other allies, which is to show restraint?
I think it will obviously be factored into the equation in a major way. But on the front of the FT, we had an interesting analysis of how Israel is weighing its options after the Iran attack yesterday. And a couple of quotes stood out for me. One was from the American spokesperson for the National Security Council, John Kirby, who said that we're not looking for a wider war with Iran. And that dovetails with another American official saying that they wouldn't participate in any retaliation. And this struck me as, once again, the Americans giving away the advantage to the Iranians by telling them, look, we're not going to take part in any retaliatory action. We want it all to calm down. If I was the Iranian leader, I'd be sitting there thinking, great, I've got a new normal here. I can fire 300+ missiles at Israel, and the Americans are not going to retaliate. What they should say,
that we're going to back you if you want to go to war with Iran.
What they should say is they should condemn the attack in the strongest possible terms and leave it at that. Leave them guessing. It's a massive strategic misstep to let the Iranians believe straight off the bat they're not going to receive a painful price from the American point of view.
Hold on a second.
And this is commensurate with an overall attitude of appeasement towards the Iranians from the Biden administration, from the moment he took office.
This is nonsense.
It's not nonsense.
It is nonsense.
It's not nonsense. Wait, let me finish the point. The Americans have been evading their own sanctions legislation to release $16 billion of sanctions to the Iranians up to October the 7th, and $10 billion since. And turning a blind eye to things like oil sanctions and otherwise to flood the Iranian regime with cash in the hope of some vague nuclear deal, which has only resulted in the Iranians making more progress to a bomb than they ever have before. If that's not appeasement, I don't know what is.
Well, hold on. Look, the idea that America should be committing to helping Israel actually step up another attack and make things escalate even worse is nonsense. I mean, militarily, Israel is much more powerful in terms of its missile capability than Iran. We know that. The idea that America would actually be committing itself to actually joining in another round of escalation is clearly that's not going to happen. And Biden doesn't need a war in the Middle East. He's got plenty of other things to be doing, and we don't want a war in the Middle East.
I mean, I didn't say that America should necessarily be contributing towards the retaliation, or definitely not to sparking a regional war. But what I did say is that it shouldn't be telegraphing its position to the Iranians straight off the bat. I don't think that's very sensible at all.
But even when we hear Iran saying that the mission is accomplished and the operation is over, and President Biden is saying, take it as a win, do you not think that perhaps not retaliating might be a way forward to end?
No.
It's a draw. That's what President Biden's saying.
No, absolutely not. Well, yeah, Biden's, as I said, been appeasing the Iranians for years and years with ultra-soft, dovish methods that have totally backfired and blown up in his face. As Naftali Bennett, the former Prime Minister of Israel, tweeted this evening, when the bully tries to hit you 350 times and succeeds only 7 times, that's not a win.
But hold on a second.
That's not a win. And that's not how you win a war. And that's not how you deter an enemy. If there's no retaliation at all, what we will be in...
There will be retaliation. No one's saying there won't be any retaliation.
...is a new normal whereby Iran can send 350 missiles into Israeli airspace and get away with it, and do it again and again and again. Just like Hamas, the message to Hamas without destruction of Hamas would be to do October 7th again and again and again. There's got to be a deterrent, an effective and painful deterrent, to make sure this doesn't happen again.
What do you suggest? You suggest they start, a massive missile launch where, in Tehran now? What would you suggest happens?
I'm not a military planner.
Well, it's easy to say there should be a response.
Well, look, we're talking about principles, and the principle I'm trying to illustrate is one of deterrence. Without deterrence, you've got a bigger problem, because they'll do it again and again until you do have a full-blown war.
Why do you think it was a good idea that Israel struck the consular building in Damascus? Because very many people don't think it was, including some of the Americans.
I don't know. I mean, I think
that's an important question.
It's an important question, and it could be that it was an Israeli miscalculation. There's been a lot of...
Quite an important one.
Let me speak. there's been lots of pressure on Major General Aaron Khalifa, who is the head of military intelligence, that he may have miscalculated and underestimated the extent of the Iranian response to that. It could have been a miscalculation. I don't know. I'm not privy to the discussions around the War Cabinet table. None of us are.
But Israel hasn't actually claimed responsibility, have they?
But it hasn't denied it.
What we're talking about is principles. And in terms of the principles, when you're faced with a huge attack like this, you've managed to defend yourself fine. But as we saw on October the 7th, defences only go so far before the enemy gets through. And deterrent, the lesson of October the 7th is deterrent and eliminating the threat before it gets to that stage is the only way towards security.
See, the trouble is this government, this Netanyahu regime really has actually helped Hamas. We've known that in the past. I mean, with the distraction of the West Bank, with Hezbollah, they were turning a blind eye where £30 million a month was coming from Qatar into Hamas.
But that wasn't to help Hamas, that was to help Gaza.
It wasn't.
I mean, that was part
Where
of
do you think
Israeli...
the money went? Do you think it all went to libraries and public
this was part of Israeli naivety. It was part of something called the concept.
Was it naivety?
It was part of the Israeli hopes that allowing money into the Strip, both via Qatar and also by allowing Gazan workers into Israel to work, would actually bring stability.
We will continue this discussion now, but we're going to have to take a break now. Thank you very much for the moment.